the community, the Portuguese community here, did your parents have a lot of connection with the other Portuguese, or just?
I would say my parents had a connection with everyone here was here, not just Portuguese. I mean, our immediate neighbors were German on one side, and there were, my family was very close with that family. They had, let's see.
What were their names?
Schnyder, Mr. and Mrs. Schnyder.
Oh, that was Regina.
Regina Denny's parents, yes. Regina and I grew up together. She was some years older. She had a sister, Cecilia, a brother, Carl. They were both older, and a younger sister was a year younger than I, and she and I were playmates from the time we were little. We had a gate between our yards. We ran back and forth, and we had a lot of fun together. It was just, we were a very close family. On the other side were the Souzas, Mary Susan and her family, and next to them were the Rodrigues, Peggy Rodrigues, a Hispanic family, and we were all friends with each other, and everyone seemed to get along very nicely.
I didn't realize that you were right next door to the Denny's.
Yeah, Regina Denny, yes. I remember her wedding, as a matter of fact.
Oh, yes, that's amazing. I had missed that. So actually, there were a lot of young people right on the street.
Yes, especially after the housing development came in, there were a number of young people. Across the street was a family with 3 daughters, and we were all.
And their name?
The Shueys.
Shuey?
The Shueys, yes. Shueys. Yeah.
And you were explaining also, I sort of wanted to get this image of what the shopping was like. You really didn't have to have a car in order to be able to get whatever you needed growing up here.
Exactly. Of course, we didn't have cell phones, and we didn't have all the technology, and my family grew up with a radio. We'd sit around and listen to the radio. Then my uncle got a television. Oh, Henry got a television because he could afford it. And so everybody in the family went over to watch Howdy Doody. I remember the flickering picture of Howdy Doody, but we watched. And then, of course, TV improved, and eventually my family got a small television as well. But those were the days when children, and something I think is missing today, when Mom taught the child how to crochet and embroidery and sew. I remember going out in the backyard with my watercolors and painting the flowers in the garden. My father was rather miffed because he was hoping he'd find a son who would be a fisherman, or at least a daughter who would be a fisherman, but not this one. This one liked books instead. So anyway, but children, we played together. We got after school, we played together. We visited each other. We stayed at each other's house. We had dinner with each other. It was just a different environment. There were no other distractions.
Right.
That's what you did. You socialized.
Yeah. How about at the school? Was there a lot of social things from the school, or you were so far?
Remember, we had a choir, and we had an 8th grade play, and that's about all I remember, really. There was nothing. I mean, we had as part of the school program, we had catechism. The nuns would come and take us to catechism classes and bring us back if we went. And there was a music program. But other than that, there were no major activities. Everything was, family and neighbor oriented.
And how about at high school?
Well, I suppose if you lived near the high school, there were more activities for you. But for those of us who lived in Mission San Jose, driving back and forth was a problem. I know Dorothy Rodrigues became a cheerleader, and I was involved in drama from Mission San Jose, but most of my other friends were not immediately involved in a lot of activities in school.
Right. And what do you remember about Irvington High School?
What do I remember? Because it was a little closer, there was a few of my classmates were cheerleaders. I was still very actively involved in drama there. But again, because the school wasn't just down the street, it was a little more difficult to have a lot of heavy school activities. There were some boys who were involved in sports, of course.
Okay. So that's pretty much it for now. Do you have anything else that you want to say about this area? And
well, I just wish that we could still make it a thriving community, that we could still have a supermarket here. We'll never have the same kinds of things, but we could have a supermarket, and we could have maybe 1 or 2 restaurants that were more generic. and have people actually participate in these things, because I think it's in the supermarkets and the restaurants, people, and maybe the coffee shops, that people interact with each other and become friends and establish a sense of community. I don't think there's a sense of community here in Mission San Jose that maybe was here at one time.
I see.
And I think that's kind of sad.
Right, right, that's true. Okay, well, thank you so much for
Thank you very
telling
much.
me.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Question. Okay, tell me about your mom, like any stories she had about growing up in Decoto, and then also what it was like to be a mom here in Mission San Jose, activities, etc.
Well, she grew up in the ranch, and she didn't do much more than stay on the ranch. She had, neighbor friends and relatives and what have you, and they would come to the ranch and get together. She did learn to do things basically that a stay-at-home girl would do. She learned how to cook from her mother and to sew and things of that nature. And her life was not, she went to the Holy Ghost, that she did. That's where she met my dad. And the story goes that a number of boys had asked her to ride up on the Ferris wheel, and she rejected them. And then my father came along and he asked her, and she said, okay, so she went up with him. I guess some of the other fellows were wondering what he had that they didn't have. But anyway, she ended up marrying him several years later. Anyway, that was the story there. And after she married, she moved to Mission San Jose, and she was a homemaker. As I say, she worked for a few months, or nearly a year maybe, for the St. Mary's of the Palm, and working in the kitchen there. And then when I came along, she decided that was enough of that. She was a full-time wife and mother. She sewed, she cooked, she gardened, she washed the car when that happened. There was only one car, and in those days, if Dad had to, if she needed the car, she drove Dad to work, or he found a ride to work with a friend of his, and in the evening she went and picked him up, because during the daytime she used the car for whatever she needed it for. They made do. I remember sometimes that things were not always, there wasn't always a lot of money, and sometimes on Fridays we would have pancakes for dinner, but we were never hungry. And we never thought anything about it. We were happy. Dad had he was the most beautiful, wonderful vegetable garden. His vegetable garden stretched all the backyard, neat rows. He picked the weeds, he fertilized, he did everything, and there was nothing better than going out in the garden and pulling up a fresh carrot and eating it. Didn't have to worry about fertilizer or anything of that. And Mom cooked, and she made wonderful pies. She did that. She made wonderful pies, and bread, of course. And she taught me. I was her daughter. She taught me to sew and to cook and to do other things. And she played with me as a child. And when I went to school, I already knew my ABCs. I knew my colors, because Mom had taught me those things. She didn't send me to preschool. She did it. And I always thought, she's the role model. If I ever had children, this is what I want to do. So she was a stay-at-home mother, but I think she was pretty happy with it. She had wanted, her goal was to be a hairdresser. And that's what she still loved. She had a daughter. I don't know if she would have done if she had a son. But I was always her patient, her client. I was always getting permanents and curled and snipped. When I went to elementary school, I had perfect sausage curls. And permanents every year. So I said, when I grow up, no one is ever going to give me another permanent. I'm going to have long hair. Well, my hair is down here. I've never had another permanent. But she did it for the neighbor. She did it for herself. She did it for her relatives. And she loved it. That's what she did. And I said, Mom, how come you never did that? She said, we couldn't afford it. There was nothing I could do, I was afraid to ask my father for a few dollars to buy some new socks. She said that's just the way it was. You just didn't do it. You got married. That's what a girl did. She got married. And as I said, my generation was pretty much the same thing, but there was always some streak in me that said, not me.
Mm-hmm. So how about, did she belong to the PTA, or did she do with any church things?
She went to church faithfully until the day she couldn't go to church anymore. But no, she was not a joiner. I many times urged her to come to school to join PTA. No, she didn't want to do it. But she was faithful. If I was in a school play, she was there. If I needed a costume sewn for a school play, she did it. Mm-hmm. She was supportive in that sense. But she was kind of a withdrawn person. I mean, she was friendly, but she didn't want to be real. So my father was one who was out there, but not my mother.
So she stayed connected with her family?
With her family, yes.
So there was a lot of going to Decoto? And
a lot of going to Decoto, probably every week, or maybe sometimes twice a week.
Oh, so that was
Very close to her mother
great
and father and
connection.
her brothers, and yes.
So, what do you remember about going to Decoto?
I remember that my grandmother would say, the cookie jar's over there. And my grandmother always had nice cookies in it for her grandchildren, so I'd go over and get a peanut butter cookie. She was a great peanut butter cookie maker. But she used to bake for the church. She baked Mary's cakes and pies were just famous at church. She never went to church because she didn't drive and her husband didn't take her. But she always had her things available at the church for the bake sales.
Mm-hmm.
So that was her contribution.
And brothers and sisters, that would be your aunts and uncles.
I don't think anybody was very active in anything, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if their children were in an activity, maybe that's it. But when I think about my siblings, not my siblings, but my cousins, nobody on my father's side of the family was active really in anything, not in sports, not in theater, not in public, none of that. And my father's side, the same thing. My father's sister's son played football, I think, or baseball, I can't remember which, and he got hurt and then he didn't do that then anymore. But otherwise, there was no one in the family. I was the only one who did public speaking and theater and things of that nature.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.